My name is Jonathan Crow, and I'm a violinist in Toronto, and I'm also concertmaster at the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. I play in orchestra a lot of the year, and it's something that I love to do. It's a great collegial experience, and having the chance to play great orchestral rep is something that I really like doing. But in my free time, I really like to do chamber music and solo stuff as well, because it gives a little bit of a difference to what I do in my life, and I hope that it makes me better as a violinist, certainly. So I'm really excited to be playing the Beethoven Violin Concerto coming up next weekend with the North York Concert Orchestra. And this is a piece I chose because it, in a way, represents everything I love about music. It's a great orchestral score, but it's a little bit like chamber music. The violin doesn't actually play the solos all that often. Much of the time I'm accompanying great tunes in the woodwinds or in the string section, and in a way we have to work together to fit things together. And it's a fun piece to play because of that, as scary and exciting and difficult as it is. It's really fun because you feel like you're performing chamber music with a large group and really working together rather than just playing, a soloist or expect people to follow you. Beethoven's Violin Concerto is a very famous piece. It's an interesting story because we consider it now the pinnacle of all violin concertos and one of Beethoven's greatest works. But when it was first performed, people didn't have the same kind of respect, I would say, for the piece. In fact, the violinist between the first and second movements played, a fiddle tune behind his back in between, and we didn't think of it as this monumental achievement until more recently. And I think some of the reasons behind that, it's not a kind of typical violin concerto. There's no incredibly virtuosic fireworks in the violin part, but instead there's a lot of dialogue between the orchestra and the violin. Perhaps the orchestra will introduce a theme, and then I'll do a variation on it, or you'll hear a theme in the woodwinds, and then I'll kind of continue it on. So there's a lot of back and forth. It's not something you can just kind of play and assume that everybody's going to catch it. There has to be interaction with the orchestra. It starts with a very famous motive. The timpani actually just plays 4 single notes like this. And that sets a lot of the material for the rest of the piece. Actually, a lot of the accompaniment material will be these kind of like really strong 4 strokes, yum, bum, 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 and he'll transform that throughout the movement. The violin even gets it in a little bit more of a lyrical fashion. Same basic idea, but something that's been transformed perhaps into something more tuneful. So the piece starts with these timpani notes, after which there's a great tune in the wind section. Immediately followed again by those same 4 notes, this time in the strings. And we go through all kinds of different stuff. There's a great second theme in it, and the violin doesn't actually truly get to play the entire second theme until the very end of the movement after the cadenza, and it's one of the greatest moments of the piece, where the violinist comes out of and this is just accompanied by a beautiful pizzicati in the strings, and it's one of the kind of great moments in all of classical music. A lot of very exciting things in the violin part. It starts with this kind of very treacherous set of octaves, which maybe are not exciting for the audience, but it's certainly exciting when you're up on stage kind of thinking about it for about 4 minutes during the opening tutti. And then all kinds of variations on the great tunes the orchestra is playing. The second movement is very similar in that the violin doesn't actually get to play the opening tune. The horns start, and they play it, and the violin just has a little response. So you hear this in the horns. And the violin just does a little decoration at the end of the bar. And it continues on like this. There's actually, I suppose, about 3 renditions of this. The orchestra plays by itself, then the solo violin comes in with the accompaniment, and then we do that again before we get to the next tune of the movement. And when this comes, again, it's one of those amazing moments because it's not what we're expecting at all. It's such an unusual form for the movement to bring in the second theme and just have it be something totally different. The violin plays. with all kinds of beautiful variations before it comes to a close. The last movement is something that's a little bit more recognizable perhaps in its structure. It's just a very standard rondo form, and the violin actually starts with a solo this time directly out of the second movement. And we hear lots and lots of variations of that. And then he takes most of the middle material somehow from this one little motive of, and does variations on the rhythm and perhaps direction of this. One of the greatest pieces ever written for any instrument, but certainly for the violin, and it's one of the most fun pieces to play, and I say this both as an orchestral player. It's fun to play in orchestra, and it's really fun to play as a soloist. I hope you can come join us next Saturday, June the 2nd at 8 o'clock p.m. at the York Minster Citadel with the North York Concert Orchestra.